Hi friends, Pastor Jeff here with another daily devotional. Something I've found to be true in my own experience and also just in, relating with other people is that often what gets us in trouble is not necessarily what is happening to us in the moment, but rather it's about what we're telling ourselves about what will happen as a result of this in the future. Right? It's not always just what is happening right now, it's the story we're telling ourselves about what this is going to mean for tomorrow. And so for example, it's like, hey, we hear that there's a storm coming, and so we got to run out and buy all the toilet paper. I'm not sure why people run out and buy toilet paper, but you start hoarding toilet paper, you start hoarding food, right? The reality is there's plenty of toilet paper, there's plenty of food. If we just all kind of took what we needed for the day, we've been fine. But we're worried about tomorrow, and so we start hoarding, right? We're not worried about the shortage that's happening. We're worried about the shortage that could happen, and so we start hoarding. We tell a story about it, or maybe you're married and your spouse was supposed to do the laundry. They don't do the laundry, and you're like, oh, they don't love me. They don't think about me. They don't care about me. It's like, well, no, they just didn't do the laundry, right? But we're telling our stories about what's happening, and we're worried about it. We are by nature, we're all interpreters. Like, we're all storytellers. There's what happens to us, the facts, just what happens, and then there's all the stories and the connections and the ways that we try to make sense of our world. Right? We're interpreters, we're storytellers, and sometimes the stories that we tell ourselves can be really scary. And so I think to help us kind of arrest our hearts when we're starting to tell stories, when we're starting to interpret the world in a scary way, is just Matthew 6, verse 34, which Jesus says this: "Therefore do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble." Like, this is what he's telling them. Live in the day, right? Not a story about tomorrow. How we get through life and how we get through scary things is by taking it a day at a time and living in the day, not living in the story that we tell ourselves about tomorrow. Like, what is actually happening right now? Not what might happen, not what could happen, like what is actually happening right now, and what do you need to meet this current need? There might be trouble for tomorrow. Like, there might be trouble for tomorrow, but there's enough going on today. Like it says, sufficient for the day is its own trouble. So what's the trouble today? Not the story about tomorrow, but what's going on today, and what do you need today? Right? This is a call to live kind of more in the moment. And that doesn't mean that we don't, plan, but it does mean that we don't panic. It's not that we don't plan, but it's that we shouldn't panic. The reality is we can, maybe plan for tomorrow, try to do our best to be prepared. But the reality is we start panicking when we're worried about the trouble that exists in tomorrow. It doesn't exist now, it exists tomorrow. But we're so obsessed with planning about it, we're so obsessed with trying to avoid it, that now we're panicking in the day for a tomorrow that hasn't even happened yet. And so listen, if we're living constantly in tomorrow, then our mind is going to a place that our body isn't present, and that's never a good thing. Like, have your mind be where your body is. Like, live in the moment. And when we're going into tomorrow, if we're always thinking about, what could happen in the future and the story that we're telling ourselves about that, the reality is that's a story that we're now living in without grace. Right? God's grace does not exist yet for tomorrow, because tomorrow does not exist yet. God's grace is sufficient for you in the day. God is here for you today. His grace will get you through whatever you're struggling with today. But as soon as you start going into tomorrow, you're going to a place mentally that God isn't even there yet, because it hasn't even happened yet. You don't even know if tomorrow is going to exist or not, right? Like, you could be called home or the world could end, right? And so, we're starting to go to a place where grace isn't. And so when we're living in tomorrow, of course we're going to be panicking. Of course we're going to be panicking. And so, friends, as we go through life and try to interpret things, and as we try to tell stories about what's happening, don't tell a story about what might be or could be in tomorrow. No, live in the day. Live in what is actually happening. And give your tomorrow to God. Like, that's what you should do with your tomorrow. What should you do? Give it to God. Right? I think the challenge is that, when we're telling the story, we're trying to take the pen away from God. Like, we're scared about the chapter that He might write. Let's just remember, friends, we can trust God, because His hand that is writing the story of our life, His hand that's writing our tomorrow, it's a hand that's been, pierced through with nails. It's a hand that's been scarred to prove His love. And so let's trust the hand that holds that pen. And my encouragement would be just really practically pay attention to your emotions. Like if you're someone who's living with anxiety, living with stress, I think that's often a signal that you're trying to take the pen away from God and you're not really trusting Him. And so I think Bible would call you is to pray. If you struggle with living in the story of what could be or what might be, and maybe you call yourself a planner, but the reality is you're just a panicker. And I think we can all be there sometimes. If we're sensing panic in our heart, that's a signal that we need to get down on our knees. Like we need to pray. How we trust God with tomorrow is by casting our cares on Him. I love that verse from 1 Peter 5. It says, cast your cares on God knowing that He cares for you. And that's what Jesus is pointing towards here. Like tomorrow's going to take care of itself. Why? Because God's going to take care of you. And so friends, live in the day. Don't tell yourself a story about tomorrow. Live in the day. Take care of what's happening today. God is with you today. And God will be with you tomorrow. So just give your tomorrow to Him. Don't panic, but experience peace in the present by trusting God day by day. I hope that gives you some encouragement for today. I'll see you tomorrow with another daily devotional. God bless.